Handsome one, isn't he? I lost my first boy. Little black-haired beauty. He was a fighter too. Tried to beat the fever that took him.
All right. We're finally going to discuss something that's been coming up a lot lately, and that is an older theory, actually a couple years old or more probably. So there may be some older videos on this, I'm not sure. But let's talk about Gendry possibly being the son of Robert and Cersei, the legitimate son, as opposed to a Baratheon bastard. So this has been coming up again in a lot of live streams. Shout out to Habig, you know who you are. You bring it up all the time. And I do think this is definitely a book possibility. But the show, I'm not really sure, although they should go the same route. So let's talk about it. Even though this has been around a while, I want to give my opinion because a lot of you guys have been asking, is Gendry the trueborn son of Robert and Cersei? Alright, so let's first take a look at the scene where we first hear Cersei's story to Catelyn in Season 1 about losing her black-haired beauty.
Handsome one, isn't he? I lost my first boy. Little black-haired beauty. He was a fighter too. Tried to beat the fever that took him. Robert was crazed, beat his hands bloody on the wall. All the things men do to show you how much they care. The boy looked just like him. Such a little thing. He came to take his body away. And Robert held me. I screamed and I battled, but he held me. They took him away and I never saw him again. Never visited the crypt. Never. I prayed to the mother every morning and night that she return your child to you. I am grateful. Perhaps this time she'll listen.
Alright, so first of all, this is the most sincere Cersei has been in this entire story, even more so in the show. In the books, this went down a lot differently. Apparently, she never had this child of Robert's by drinking moon tea. So let's set that up right up front. During this scene, if she actually did swap out a baby perhaps, which is certainly possible because that's been done in the books, then she would absolutely have to be lying here to Catelyn Stark in Season 1. So now let's take a look at the scene where Gendry meets Ned, and Ned asks about his mother.
Then he started asking me about my mother.
Your mother?
Who she was, what she looked like.
What did you tell him?
She died when I was little. She had yellow hair. She'd sing to me sometimes.
Find anything?
King Robert's bastard son.
Alright, so Gendry simply says that he remembers his mother dying when he was young, singing to him sometimes, as well as having yellow hair. Now that certainly points to Cersei as far as the yellow hair, but not about the singing. I've been saying in response to this on live streams that I think we'd have some kind of connection of foreshadowing where we find out that Cersei sang to her children at times, even if it was Myrcella, Tommen, or Joffrey. That would make the connection there pretty clear, but we did not ever get that connection there with Cersei singing, and there's no connection in the books as well, and I could not find any reference to Cersei singing, although that doesn't necessarily shut this entire thing down. It could happen off screen. There could be some intimate moments with her children we never know about that happens off screen or off page, so it's still a possibility, but I think that's one thing they possibly needed to connect there to foreshadow that Gendry will be revealed as Cersei's legitimate son. But we do have some evidence for this theory that supports it as well. First off, in the books you have the tavern wench thing. Gendry says on many occasions that his mother was probably a tavern wench, and in the books, Cersei does in fact dress up like a tavern wench to go see Jaime, and also specifically when she snuck in to see Tywin's dead body before everyone else. Jaime is on guard of his body. She sneaks in the room dressed as a tavern wench, and Jaime wonders who she is and how she got in there. So that's definitely a possible connection there between Cersei being a tavern wench and Gendry's mother being a tavern wench, but of course in the show this wasn't brought up at all. We've never seen Cersei sneak around to see Jaime in the early days, any flashbacks, anything like that, or at Tywin's funeral. There's no indication of show Cersei at least dressing up as a tavern wench or dressing up at all. But nevertheless, the connection remains. And of course, the biggest piece of evidence is the yellow hair itself. Gendry specifically says he remembers his mother having yellow hair, which of course would fit Cersei's description, but that does bring up another point as well. Gendry would have to be at least 3 to 4 to 5 years old, something in that area, to actually have these memories of his mother in the first place. So that would mean that Cersei would have to be sneaking out to see Gendry for at least 3 or 4 years before she decided to leave him alone for the rest of his life and somehow make up a story about his mother dying or having someone tell him that if that's the case. But the yellow hair is certainly a connection there, and it could point to the idea that Cersei did have Robert's child, but decided to hide him just to get back at Robert so he'd never become king, and her own children with Jaime, who she actually loved, would become the heirs to the throne. And another piece of evidence, at least in the books, now this was not stated in the show at all, is that Tabo Mott received double the usual apprentice fee from somebody who hid his face wearing a purple cloak. So someone did in fact want to look after Gendry. The question is, who is that person and why would he want to take care of him? It could be simply Jon Arryn. Jon Arryn did in the show and books want to look after Robert's bastards. He was the one, after all, that figured out that Joffrey, Myrcella, as well as Tommen were all three Jaime's children instead of Robert's via the whole "the seed is strong" thread. So perhaps it was Jon Arryn, who was handed the king for Robert the entire time he was king, who actually found out that this was Robert's son and decided to make him an apprentice and hide him in plain sight to keep him safe. But that doesn't necessarily mean he was actually Cersei's son, just because somebody paid double the apprentice fee and some high lord or somebody in a high position at least took care of the child and made him the apprentice of Tabo Mott. And we do have a couple show connections as well. So let's take a look one more time at a specific little line when Cersei is telling Catelyn again the first time about losing her first black-haired beauty.
I lost my first boy, little black-haired beauty. He was a fighter too. Tried to beat the fever that took him.
So specifically, Cersei says he was a fighter and he tried to beat the fever that took him. And sure enough, later on in Game of Thrones Season 7, when Gendry first meets Jon, we do hear this.
Sir Davos told me where you're going, Your Grace, and why. Let me come with you.
Don't be a fool. You're not a soldier.
No, but I'm a fighter. And he won't be needing a smith with a sword like that.
So that does kind of tie back to the same scene where Cersei told the story in the first place, where she said her little black-haired beauty was a fighter, but this definitely could connect and be a little bit of a hint that this is the case, because this scene was about Jon meeting Gendry, a Baratheon meeting a Stark again, kind of a parallel of Robert and Ned when they were young and they fought together and won. So I do find it interesting that they decided to use this line, "he is a fighter," to kind of tie it back to the Cersei scene, and this scene was all about Robert and Ned, essentially their sons meeting each other, and Jon and Gendry paralleling the story about Ned and Robert fighting together and winning. So that's pretty much all the evidence for it, and there are a couple things that are actually against it as well. I believe that Cersei is absolutely telling the truth here. You can see it by the way she's acting. She is actually sad about this situation, and again, I will acknowledge she could be sad about lying about the situation, but either way, she lost a son. I think this was Cersei's most sincere moment in the show, and it would seem to break her character as well, because she did hate Robert so much at that time. She did not want to bear his children, both book and show, so this would fit her character and the idea of her taking care of her children, but then why would she randomly stop 3 or 4 years later when Gendry was told his mother died? So that doesn't make any sense, because she does love her children more than anything in the world, and she can't blame the children for who the father is. So why would she go visit him for 3 or 4 years dressed as a tavern wench, sing to him and take care of him or whatever just to see him, and then just randomly abandon the child and never go back to see him again? And another thing that could go against this as evidence as well is, would it make sense in the story itself? Would it actually make sense for them to reveal Gendry as Robert's bastard, and then later on reveal again that he is not actually his bastard, but he is actually Cersei and Robert's trueborn son? This could be the case. It could parallel the Jon thing as well, where Jon has a secret parent and all that good stuff. So it could be a good parallel to that. And it would be a little bit more drama if you did find out that Gendry was the trueborn son of Cersei and Robert, because then you would have a little more drama about who actually is the heir to the Iron Throne. Of course, Dany thinks it's her. Of course, we all know, the audience at least, that it's Jon Snow as far as being a Targaryen. But also Robert Baratheon's son would have the legitimate claim as well, because conquest is a legitimate form of taking over the throne, and he did also have Targaryen blood as far as the Baratheons, so it would introduce a little bit more drama as to who sits on the damn throne at the end, although again, in my opinion, there will not be an Iron Throne to sit on at the end of our story. But that's really irrelevant. It could actually introduce more drama into who's supposed to sit on the Iron Throne as far as the whole feudalism thing, but I think that's the whole point of the story, is that feudalism doesn't work, and I definitely don't think Jon cares about the Iron Throne. Dany may not end up caring about the Iron Throne, and Gendry, I'm not really sure if he would care to sit on it or not. And the other thing about this that would have to happen if this was true is a lot of other people would have to know about it, and we've got no hints from them whatsoever. You're likely talking about Jaime himself, you're talking about Grand Maester Pycelle at least, and maybe even Varys. Now, of course, Varys did apparently do a baby swap in the books, or so he claims, and that was the Aegon / young Griff character, or Fagon as most of us call him. So that is certainly a possibility. There have been baby swaps in the books. Varys apparently did it in the past to Aegon, if that is even true. Jon did it at the Wall as far as Monster, Gilly's son, and Mance Rayder's son. So that is a possibility this happened. But again, it goes back to the idea of Cersei going to visit him, and then she randomly stops going to see him or whatever when he's about 3 to 4 years old, since he does actually have the memory of his mother. And going back to the original story about what she told Catelyn about her firstborn son, she specifically says that Robert was there. So Robert would have been around for a little while before this child died, and he would know what his own son looked like. So I don't think a baby swap would work here, where they bring in some other baby who had already died from the streets, like Varys for example, and then Robert sees this child and doesn't recognize him as his own son, believes he actually died, and then beats his hands bloody against the wall. So she says specifically in this story, if you do believe her, that Robert was there and held her as she fought as they took his body away. So I think that's the truth, and I think Robert would know what his own son looks like regardless of age. And the final thing that goes against this is the Maggie the Frog prophecy itself. She specifically tells Cersei that she will have 3 children with golden crowns and golden shrouds, and this does not fit if Cersei would have a 4th child. Now, of course, you could kind of get around that with the idea that maybe Maggie just mentioned the one she acknowledged as her own children because she only acknowledged, for example, the children she had with Jaime, but I don't think that's the case. I think she gave specific numbers, and of course Cersei was living by this prophecy, so she would have likely counted that child in her own head, because this is essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy, and she would think that was her first son that died, and then she would of course had a couple with Jaime, but then after the 4th child came, she would no longer believe in the Maggie the Frog prophecy because she had 4 children. But of course you have to remember, in Game of Thrones Season 5, we get the flashback, the cold open of Maggie the Frog, and Cersei is still living by this prophecy and absolutely believes it, as she later on tells Jaime. So basically what I'm saying is, she would no longer believe the Maggie the Frog prophecy and still live by it by the time Season 5 rolled around if she knew that Tommen was her 4th child. So it doesn't really fit the Maggie the Frog prophecy that seems to be coming true at every step of the way. And again, we'll wait to see who the Valonqar actually is, which is more likely a book thing. In the show, they can do what they want because they cut that part of the prophecy out. But either way, so far, all of it's came true. So what's my conclusion? I believe it's certainly possible, but I do still kind of doubt it. So I'd say I'm probably 50-50 on the whole idea. I think it's a good idea. I wouldn't have a problem with it whatsoever. And I do actually think it's not a bad idea to have a big revelation like that you have this other legitimate heir in some people's eyes to the Iron Throne, to introduce a little more drama, as if there's not enough drama already with the fucking Night King. But again, it goes back to Cersei having to lie about that, and she would have already known about her own son, and she would have never followed the Maggie the Frog prophecy or believed it in the first place. But anyway, guys, as usual, I'll pass it off to you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Gendry is the true-born son of Robert and Cersei, and will that come up in Game of Thrones Season 8 and cause more drama about who's supposed to sit on the Iron Throne, regardless if you believe there's going to be an Iron Throne in the first place? And as usual, thank you for all the support, especially to you guys on Patreon, and a huge shout out to my executive Patreon SmokeScreen producers, D. Brown, Erin Habig, Lala Gig, HoonJive, Mike Colton, Doc Holliday, Anastasia, Carole Brown, Goska, Lisa Phillips, Alfred Borstmayer, and John Carey. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the support, and to everyone on Patreon and YouTube as well. And if you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and a share. And be sure to subscribe to get everything and click that notification bell so you're notified when I drop a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.